these days going to conferences is a real investment of time. Spending half a day out of the office is a real big deal. But last Thursday I went to an interesting conference in Liverpool talking about the best practices in science-based incubation. Now, although MSP doesn't do any incubation, obviously we're interested in it because our support for business growth and for attracting inward investment is very similar to the sorts of help businesses need when they're starting up and when they're being incubated. Anyway, this conference was an international conference organised with the support of Liverpool Science Park, Liverpool's universities, UK Business Incubation and various other supporters. It was interesting. It was in the Maritime Museum in Liverpool. It was great to see the city looking good on a sunny day. But as usual with conferences, the most interesting bit was the people you met there and the conversations you had. And I was very interested in speaking to one of the delegates from Iceland, a lady who ran their incubation service, and asking her about Iceland's recovery after the economic collapse that they'd suffered. It must be 2 years ago now. And she described a couple of bits of legislation that had been passed which were actually to support both science-based incubation and getting people into jobs, into employment as a result after they'd been made redundant. And what I liked about it were two things. One, I felt it was the sort of approach, innovative approach that the public sector needs to make all over the world in order to solve the problems of the recession and of the banking crisis, but also the speed with which it was made. Now, I know Iceland's a very small country, in fact with a population of around 350, 400,000, and that's what makes it so easy. But anyway, the story is she was able to take a couple of her tenants who'd come up with some good ideas about the recession, about getting people into work, to visit ministers, it being a small country and she being a former Member of Parliament, so she knew quite a few influential people. And the two schemes they came up with were, one, if you were receiving benefits and were out of work and you decided to start your own science or technology based business, then you were entitled to keep your state benefits for 1 year while you got that business up and running. The second scheme is if you actually took a job in a company that was being incubated in a science-based incubator and you were a science or engineering, a STEM subject graduate, then the company that actually employed you was allowed to keep your benefits for 12 months. Now, these seem to be very much win-win situations because people were getting employment, companies were taking on more staff than they might have done because they had a subsidy, individuals were taking more risks in starting a business than they might have done because they had a sort of a level of income that was going to mean that their families didn't suffer. And those decisions were made very quickly. Once she'd spoken to these two ministers, the next thing she knew, she got a text from the Prime Minister saying, OK, go ahead, we'll pass the laws. And I just wish that we had locally the sorts of powers that are enabled to follow up that kind of and bring in that kind of innovation to actually make a difference locally.